What is going on, Breakthrough Success listeners? Marc Guberti here. In this episode, we're going to talk about how do we go about building habits that stick. Habits, they guide where we end up in life, for better or for worse. So, knowing the habits that we have, knowing the changes we want to make, and then truly sticking with them can help us work smarter instead of harder and move towards our desired objectives. Our guest who joins us today, he is a behavioral scientist and entrepreneur who specializes in applying behavioral science to solve business challenges. His illustrious career includes studying neuroscience at Stanford, conducting research in BJ Fogg's Persuasive Technology Lab, and being the global head of behavioral science at Walmart. He's now the CEO of Persona, a firm that uses behavioral science assessments and rigorous vetting to connect companies with exceptional talent. Our guest who joins us in this episode of Breakthrough Success is none other than Jason Hreha. Jason, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me, man.
Jason, it is a pleasure to have you on Breakthrough Success. And habits, they are the things that we don't really think about too much, but we may look back like 6 months ago and see how things went, and then it's easier to pinpoint some habits that helped and hurt us. So, before we get into changing habits and instilling good ones, I'm wondering if we could go into the fundamentals and explore what makes a habit a habit.
Oh, that's a great question. Yeah, I mean, and I actually think that there's a lot of confusion around this. So, by definition, a habit is supposed to be a small, barely conscious or unconscious behavior that you do in response to a predictable set of cues. So, the whole point of a habit is something like flicking on a light switch as you're leaving, or flicking off a light switch as you're leaving a room. Unconsciously grabbing a glass of water that is next to you at your desk and kind of sipping on it throughout your work session. These are examples of habits. They're very small motor patterns, very small behaviors that occur in response to a particular cue or a need. And I think that a lot of the confusion in the habit world is that people think things like exercise or these very big, large, effortful behaviors can actually be habits when technically they really cannot.
Hmm. So it's interesting you mentioned cues because the first time I heard of that was The Power of Habit, Charles
Hmm.
Duhigg. That book's gone on to, I mean, it's got thousands of
Yeah.
reviews on Amazon, which is very hard to do. So changing our habits, I know part of that is changing the cue, but what are some of the ways that we can go about getting rid of the bad habits instead of like feeling like a long, arduous process?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, what I always say in relation to bad habits is we have to decide, is this a bad habit or is it a bad routine or a bad behavior? I think that it's really important to make a distinction there. So, like a bad habit might be something like unconsciously just munching on, let's say, chips or some other snack, some high calorie snack as you're sitting at your desk or as you're at home. Things like that are like really barely conscious or that you're barely aware of. The best way to interrupt those things is to become aware of them. It's to put a barrier in front of them of some sort so that in order to engage in that behavior, you actually have to consciously decide to do it. And so, for example, let's say that you have a let's say a candy snacking habit where you just have, let's say, little bowls of candy throughout your house. The best way to interrupt that bad habit would be to either, let's say, put a lid on top of it so that you'd have to then consciously open the lid, or even just put it up out of the way so that in order to actually access it, you would have to, like, let's say, get on a step stool, like go grab the step stool, move it to no location, step on top of it in order to get it. So it's really all about just putting in what I would call like a consciousness barrier. So basically putting in some activity that you'd have to do in front of it in order so that you actually are consciously aware that you're doing the thing so that you can actually take the conscious effort to then inhibit that behavior. So that's really the best way to break bad habits. But the best way to break bad behaviors, like conscious things that you're consciously doing that you really don't want to do, that's like a whole different game. And what I always say is that, behaviors are done for a reason. We don't just like our brains, our bodies are very smart. They don't just start doing things for no reason at all. You're usually getting some benefit or solving some problem in your life, even with the things that you deem to be bad habits. And so I think really the key thing to stopping a bad behavior that you don't want to do is to first gain clarity on why am I doing it in the first place, and to really just kind of gain some self-awareness there and to figure out, okay, is there a better way that I can kind of satisfy this need or scratch this itch that my body or my brain has in some more healthy way. So
And I just want to check. I mean, you mentioned habits, and I like the idea of having these barriers in front, which is going to help.
yeah.
Uh, what's the difference between habits and behaviors?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I would say that a habit, it tends to be a very small, basically automatic reflex that your brain initiates in response to some need that you have, right? So, for example, um, if you are sitting down and you have a glass of water, as I mentioned before, next to you, and some part of your brain says, "Oh, I'm a little thirsty," or "I just need a little bit more hydration," your your hand can very automatically and easily grab that cup of water and sip on it, right? That's a good example of a habit. It's automatic, it occurs below conscious awareness, it's in response to some need, and it's cued by, in that case, some internal state, right? Some internal state of thirstiness or whatever. So that would be like a habit. Basically, the key characteristics of it are that it's automatic, like barely conscious or unconscious, and it's small. It doesn't require a whole lot of effort. A behavior, or what I would call, um, I actually like to make the distinction in general between habits and practices. I like to use the word a practice because what most of us want to do when we say, "Hey, I want to start an exercise habit," or "I want to start a habit where I'm learning Spanish," or insert whatever skill you want here. The reason I like to use the word practice is because these are all things that are hard, they're effortful, you have to put conscious attention on them, and you kind of have to stretch the limits of your abilities. And the whole point of doing these things that people traditionally call habits is to just become a better person, to self-improve in some way, right? To gain a new aptitude or a new skill. And so that's why I like to use the word practice as like kind of the dichotomy there. But so basically, when you move outside of the habit realm, you're now dealing with things that are effortful, that require conscious attention. They're conscious, you just can't do them quickly. And in general, these behaviors tend to be bigger or bulkier, right? So going on a run requires, I mean, it requires a lot of effort, and it's actually a fairly complex behavior. It's not just moving my hand to like a foot in order to grab a glass and sipping on it, without much conscious effort. And so once you get out of this automatic small behavior realm, now you're just dealing in the realm of real behaviors, and if you're doing them for self-improvement or betterment purposes, I like to call them practices. But I think that it's really important to maintain this distinction and that habits, um, they're important, but I think that we overstate their importance, or I think that people in the self-help world overstate their importance because, once again, in order to stay automatic, in order to stay below conscious awareness and to be almost reflexive, they have to be very small. And of course, you can have death by a fat thousand paper cuts. Like small actions done regularly over and over again can have a large cumulative effect, but habits probably aren't going to dramatically change your life for the better or for the worse that much. Of course, they can be a drag on you. Like if you have like a snacking habit or some other just kind of um, not ideal habit, of course, yeah, it can like, hurt you. It could cause you to gain more weight than you would like, et cetera. But it's probably not going to make or break your life. So I actually think that there's a huge misunderstanding with habits and that most of us should actually overemphasize their importance. And we should be thinking more about practices, about like what are the really challenging, hard, big things that I want to do in my life, and how do I get myself to do those things?
I like how you broke that down because I think a lot of people would say, let's go back to the Spanish. I feel like a lot of people, if you let's say you look at 10 flashcards a day of Spanish and you do that for 21 days. People will say it's become a habit at that point, but it's still a practice. And being able to group the effortless habit that doesn't really take much thought, like turning off the lights when you leave a room, versus something that takes effort, like looking at the flashcards, it's a different mentality and a different approach between habits and behaviors. Going back to the Spanish example, because a lot of people can relate to learning a new language, or they tried to, or they haven't. What do you think causes people to not do the desired practice or to give up on it after they've tried it for a bit?
Yeah, I mean, it's very complex to understand exactly why any given individual does or doesn't do something. But in general, the reason that somebody would not follow through with an activity like that is that one, it's just too hard, right? Like it's just too challenging. Another one would be there's really no payoff, there's no reward. So if you're just learning it to learn it and you're not actually going to be using it regularly, if you don't have a big trip coming up where where you really want to use it and actually speak that language, or if you don't have some kind of reward or payoff in your, kind of daily or weekly life where you're actually using that skill in order to do something that's like meaningful or useful to you, if that doesn't exist there, you're probably not going to be able to maintain the motivation to continue doing that challenging activity over and over again. I would say that those are probably going to be the two main modulators for whether or not a person will continue doing something that's really challenging. Yeah, as once again is like I said the word easy before, like these behaviors will never be easy, but you can make them easy in the sense of them being situationally relevant or convenient. Maybe we should use the word convenience instead of easiness, right? Because working out at the gym is never going to be, if you're doing it right, it's never going to be easy, but it can be convenient, right? Like if the gym's an hour away, that's not convenient. But if it's the gym, you have a gym in your garage or in a room in your house, then it can be convenient, even though it's never going to be easy, if you get what I'm saying there. And so I think that there's this convenience factor, and then I think the other ones, as I just said, the other big factor is is there some payoff? If you're just learning it for the Spanish for a year, you're never really speaking it with people. You're never connecting with other humans in a meaningful way, like either whether or not it's on a trip or whether or not just talking to other people in your community. Yeah, I mean, there's no chance that you're probably gonna stick with that for any meaningful amount of time.
Yeah, I mean, I like the idea. You need to have a payoff to do what you're doing, but it definitely has
Yeah,
to be convenient also. So that could explain why people want to build towards, like, let's say 6, 7 figure careers and like businesses, but they stop because you have to work 9 to 5, you have to commute both ways. So it's not necessarily convenient to work those extra hours after you've come home, you've had dinner. So, you could feel pretty tired after the a long day. But some people naturally do it anyway. So there are some practices that have massive payoffs, but they're
yeah.
not always convenient. What are some ideas for sticking with those types of practices?
Yeah, well, I think that in those situations, like number one, something I talk about in my book a lot is it's really all about I think the key to getting what you want in life and the key to changing your behavior is to pick the right behaviors in the first place. I don't really believe in habit hacks. I don't really believe in like little behavior hacks in order to try and get yourself to do anything. Like, um, you know, uh, there's a site called Stick where it's like you can create like a big punishment for yourself if you don't follow through with something. That's a good example of like a behavior hack or a habit hack. I just don't really believe in that stuff. It'll have a very marginal benefit, but it's really not going to like really change the game as to whether or not you like consistently follow through with something very hard long term. My whole belief is that instead of trying to get yourself to do something that is very that you're struggling with or that you keep trying to do over and over again, but you just can't quite do, instead of just trying to like bang your head against the same behavior or the same activity over and over again, you should probably just pick a new one that actually will help you accomplish your goal or help you accomplish your end state that actually you enjoy, that is convenient for you, that aligns with your strengths, that aligns with your personality, that just kind of aligns with who you are in your whole life context. And so that's what I talk about a lot in my book is just behavior selection is the name of the game. You have to pick the right game to play in the first place rather than just trying to like force yourself to kind of follow through with something that obviously isn't working. And so that's what I talk about a lot. And just to go back to like your the question that you just asked. So if there's like let's say you're trying to start a business, you're trying to work on a side project, as you said, you have a day job, you're really tired, you have this big commute. I think the question for me would be, okay, great. So this thing is going to be hard regardless because you have this big commute, you're really tired at the end of the day, you want to do this big thing, you keep trying to work on it, you're struggling with it. What I would say is it's hard to speak in the abstract about these things, but I would want to look at what's the specific idea? Is there a way that you could actually like do it in the area near your work, just like stay a couple hours after work in that same area and maybe kind of work on it? while traffic dies down, so your commute's actually shorter, so that you can actually take advantage of kind of some efficiencies there. So is there any way that we could make it significantly more convenient? And also, is this something that you're actually very interested in and that you actually are passionate about? Because if you aren't, then it's just going to be like pulling teeth working on it. If it's something that you're actually interested in, if it's something that you actually enjoy, that you find meaningful, that you find actually brings kind of excitement to your life, you probably won't struggle that much working on it. Like it could be a very challenging project, like just objectively very challenging. But once again, if it's meaningful, if you find the work enjoyable, etc., like you're going to get energy actually from that activity. And so I think that in those situations, the answer is almost always you probably need to explore a bit more and explore some new ideas, explore some new projects, and just figure out what the right thing for you is. But one other thing that I would say is that I do think that often, I mean, we know from like computational neuroscience and just from neuroscience in general that um, it's very easy for people to get demotivated when they set goals that are just like way too big, right? If you set a goal that is way too big and way too far out, that you're probably not going to attain or approach very quickly, uh, it's just very easy to just get a, big demotivational kind of signal, and for you to feel lower energy and just kind of disappointed, and to probably like to search out something new. And so I'd say it's very important in general with any given project to set realistic, like, yeah, you can set a big eventual goal, but break it down into much closer, realistic, attainable goals, because achieving those smaller milestones and actually having that success is going to be very energizing and is going to really help your motivational system stay on track and keep you going. I think it's oftentimes when you go to Twitter or I guess X.com now, or any of these other social media sites, you see these like stories, these reels from motivational business characters where they're talking about, oh, like when I made my first million or my first 5 million, or well, when I got my first million followers, blah 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 blah. And so they encourage people. This content encourages people to set, I think, very unrealistic goals or expectations for their projects and think, oh yeah, I want to get to seven figures. Like, how quickly can I get to seven figures with my business? It'll probably take you years if it happens at all. And so don't set that as a goal for the next 12 months, because if you set that as a goal and you're like, oh, I just made my first $5,000 in sales, but my goal is seven figures, that's going to be very demotivating, right? If instead you say, hey, okay, my next goal is to make my first 100, and then my goal after that is to make my first 1,000, then my first 5,000, and along the way I have other sub goals, maybe it's goals around engagement or growth, like follower growth or something like that. But if they're actually achievable, attainable things, then you'll be getting these motivational boosts along the way, and you'll be able to stay well regulated and working hard all along the way. But if you set just this one huge kind of a delusional goal, you're going to have a hard time.
Hmm. I mean, I do appreciate the delusional goals, but you need to have those stepping
Yeah,
stones on the way to that goal. I mean, that'll definitely help with having a good behavior and sticking with it.
sure.
I feel like for a lot of people, there's a mix of good behavior and bad behavior. So, like 2010s, there used to be the thing. I mean, it's still technically habits, but we don't hear about as much TV
Sure.
surfing. You would just sit on the couch,
Mm,
change the channel. So a lot of people have given that up, but it's been replaced by doom scrolling.
yeah.
So it's good to get rid of a bad behavior, especially like if we do the everything under the bucket of procrastination. Like if you procrastinate and you get rid of one method of procrastination and then you replace it with another method of procrastination, you're not really advancing. So with that in mind, I'm wondering like you identify this bad thing you're doing, the habit routine that you want to get rid of. How do we make sure we're doing something productive with that time instead of just switching from like surfing the TV to doom scrolling?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. Well, I'd say that a couple of different things. I do think people tend to be a bit unrealistic about how much focused, concentrated work they can do in a day. Like we know from the research that, like 3 to 4 hours of just like really intense, focused, hard, like deep work is really all that people are really capable of in a given day. If you say, hey, I want to get, 10 or 12 hours of productive work done today, I mean, I just think you're just not being very realistic, and you're kind of setting yourself up for disappointment and failure. Like there's this whole thing that I've seen over the years on social media. It's called like monk mode or something like that. And the whole idea is like you just isolate yourself from the rest of the world. You like stop going out to as many social events, and you just go like all day, every day, you're just working. Uh, I think that probably most of that time, a large majority of that time is going to be very inefficient and just not all that helpful. I think that realistically, like if you can get 3, 4 hours of just like really focused, intense, hard thinking work done a day, you're in a good state. And so I'd say don't be so hard on yourself. It's okay to have some procrastination behaviors. It's okay to have some behaviors that let you unwind, that let you just enjoy yourself. Of course, behaviors can go, things can be brought to an extreme where if you're scanning social media for 8 or 10 hours a day, of course, that's like a bad compulsion at that point. And then the question just becomes, how can we actually prevent you from doing that in a realistic way? And then, as you said, we don't want to play a game of whack-a-mole where we get rid of one really bad behavior and then another bad one just pops up in its place. And what I always recommend in those situations is we need to understand why is your mind being compelled to do this activity in the first place. So let's say it's social media. Let's say you're just doom scrolling. You're just scrolling Instagram all the time. You're scrolling x.com all the time. I think we have to ask some questions of why. Like, why is your mind compelled to do this? It could be that, from an evolutionary perspective, we're very interested in our friends, our community, right? We want to understand the social happenings of all the different people around for various reasons. And so, if that could be a hypothesis, just okay, I have a hypersocial brain. I'm just very interested in exactly what's happening with all my friends and people that I admire and high status people in my extended community who are like, let's say influencers on X, et cetera. And so therefore my mind is just pinging all the time just to understand the social environment. So if our hypothesis is that this is like a social observation or a social pinging behavior, then what we can do is we can say, okay, cool. Well, what would be a more productive way to satisfy that itch that my mind has that is not doom scrolling? So maybe it's something like, okay, well, maybe I can go socialize and hang out with some friends. Or maybe I can join a run club, like a social club in my area where I can go running and kind of have this social contact and kind of meet people and talk about people and then with them gossip or talk about other people, which is basically the same function a lot of the times as what you get with social media, but this is done in an in-person context. You're exercising, it's good for you. So I think that the key thing is to really understand the why. And if we can try and understand the why of the bad behavior, we can then kind of almost Indiana Jones style, right? Just kind of like swap in a new behavior that actually is healthy and helps you kind of scratch that same itch, but that will actually you'll feel good about and that will actually lead to other positive things in your life. And so I think that really the key thing is just asking why. You may not, it may take some time to figure out why, because a lot of our behaviors are kind of a mystery. But I think that the key thing is, okay, what is the function here? What itch am I trying to scratch? And then let's figure out other ways of scratching the itch that are more productive.
And I love how Jason is deconstructing not just the behavior itself, but what's leading to it, what we're thinking, what we're trying to get out of it. And then it makes it easier to correct bad behavior with good behavior, to set realistic expectations, and know how everything is leading you towards a long-term goal. Jason, for people who want to learn more about your work and what you do, where do you suggest we go?
Yeah, so a couple different places. So I do try to post on LinkedIn a lot. So my name is Jason Hreha. It's kind of spelled in a strange way. So it's Hreha is how you spell my last name, but you can find me there on LinkedIn. Uh, I have a website. It's thebehavioralscientist.com, and you can go there and I try to post articles, every few weeks. You can also sign up for my newsletter there. So I'll send out little notes about kind of what I'm working on or what I'm thinking about. And so those are the main places to find what I'm thinking about. And then I have a company called Persona, as you said before, and the website for that is personatalent.com. And we focus on finding great talent, non-technical remote talent for companies. And we take a behavioral science approach to that. So actually a lot of my background and a lot of my thinking has been really incorporated into our recruiting process there. So
Well, breakthrough success sisters, we will have those things just shown us. Make sure you check them out. Jason, thank you for joining us on this episode. It was a pleasure to have you here today.
Thanks for having me, Mark.